Welcome to Women of Worth Worldwide. We are a ministry of NewLife Behavior International. We are women teaching women Bible-based lessons from the book, A Sense of Self, written by Dr. H.M. Motsinger. Today, we are so delighted to have with us Melanie. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome.
It's my great pleasure to be here and to participate in this outreach. I'm excited to get to talk about the stages of development in a trust environment and what the implications are for those of us as we try to figure out who we are. This lesson is part of a series on understanding our behavior. The Apostle Paul said that I do not understand what I do, for I want to do what I want to do, I do not do, and what I hate to do, I do. That was in Romans 7:15, chapter 7, verse 15. So many times it seems like we act in ways that we ourselves don't understand, and we spend time in our lives. There's actually periods of time that we're going to talk about in which we spend a great deal of energy trying to figure out who am I and what am I doing and why am I doing it. And as we make our decisions and make our mistakes and come out with results that we're not necessarily pleased with, many times we go back and we continue to evaluate that to try to come to an understanding of who am I and why am I here. Not only did Paul say that in Romans 7:15, but just about 4 verses later, he says in verse 19, for I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, I do. This I keep on doing. So it's a struggle that all of us have in trying to figure out why our behavior manifests in the way that it does. In psychology, which is the scientific study of mind and behavior, there are a number of different subspecialties, and one of them is devoted entirely to human development. Another subspecialty that's devoted to cognitive development, and that is the development of the brain and the development of human behavior and why we do what we do. When a child is born, they start off right from the beginning trying to achieve autonomy. You see babies, it's amazing how quickly they start doing things like holding up their head, rejecting food they don't like. It seems it's just a matter of months before they learn that word no, and they love to use it. And all of that has to do with achieving what's the first level, the first stage of development, autonomy. In this, the child will, around 18 months for most children, they reach a point where they have I think I'll see who's in control moment, and they decide to try to assert their will in dominance over their caretakers. That's an interesting time. All the way up through age 3 is typical for this first stage, and that the child is trying to control their bodies and trying to control their actions. Pretty early on, they learn to say no, but they also, even before that, learn the meaning of no. So you can say no, and a little bitty baby will sometimes tune up and cry because they're being thwarted or they're not getting what they want. It's just so much fun to watch. It's really one of the funnest things in God's creation, I think. But they begin to make decisions. A lot of psychologists say that some of the deepest decisions about who a person is and what kind of world they live in, those decisions are made by age 3. So it's astounding to look at a little 3-year-old and think they've already decided if the world is safe or not. They've already decided whether or not they're good or bad. And these are decisions, obviously, their life experiences will affect those, but some of those really deep decisions can be difficult to reach and to allow God's truth in to come in line with His will. The second stage is the initiative stage, where the child learns to initiate, plan, and perform tasks. This one typically lasts from age 3 to 6, And during that, they learn to do not only the expected tasks, you know, when mama says, go do this, you go do this, but they also learn to put their own creative ideas into play. And so you will see children in that age range being so creative in their play. They like to play like, and that can extend even past age 6. But it's definitely this developmental phase where they're trying out different thoughts and they're expressing their creativity, and they're really learning how to put that autonomy into play in terms of determining their lives. And from the parent's perspective, what they're doing in a trust environment is they're meeting appropriate expectations. So with the baby, when the baby cries, the baby is comforted and taken care of. If they need food, they're fed. If they need a diaper change, their diaper's changed. If they want something, the parent is responsive to that want. Even if the answer is no, it's a kind no and not a harsh no. And all of those things help develop in the child that sense of trust. I can trust my environment. And interestingly, I can trust myself that I can ask for and get what I need.
That's very interesting. It is incredible to me that all of this can happen, or does happen, at such a very young age. We've not even talked about puberty yet. So growing in an environment of trust builds autonomy and initiative, like you said, before a child turns 6. So
right.
what happens from age 6 through the teen years?
Well, around age 6, the child starts working on the stage that we call industry. They start doing things. And we already touched on that they've been playing, but here's where they're transitioning from play to doing work. And so they're able to establish goals and be responsive to goals that are set for them, such as in school. And they begin to develop skills. And they begin to practice those skills, and they master doing things that are of value to other people. And that responsiveness of other people to them is what takes them into the next phase of identity. So once they've mastered industry, then they go into identity, and as they achieve that mastery, they start getting confirmation from the people that they are doing things for and with. That, oh, you did a great job. Oh, you really play ball well. You're such a good cook. As they get those compliments and those affirmations, then they start thinking about themselves in those terms, and that develops the identity. And then as people continue to reflect back the competencies that they've developed, they develop a good self-image. That's where their feeling of competence comes from, which is very, very tightly tied to a feeling of self-worth. So when you're competent at something, you feel confident and you feel good about that. And that's largely tied to a trust environment where the parent is very kindly trying to decide how to respond to what the child is doing, whether to guide or to force, enforce rules, or whether they forgive infractions or discipline. All of that goes into parental wisdom, and it's at an age where, in every stage is true, but it's an age where I think that the parenting example of God is most helpful to us as parents. Because we think, okay, how is it that God responds to me when I make a mistake? How does he respond? And we can look at that and see the gentleness and the way that he's always working for our good as parents. If we love our children and we're raising them in an environment of trust, we're looking for their good. So that's one of the hallmarks of a trust environment, is that the child recognizes that most of the time that their parent has their best interest at heart. And even if they don't like some of the rules, their knowledge of the love and the security in that goodwill will lead the child to be more responsive in accepting the the things that are being taught.
Beautiful. Great job of explaining that. I've been thinking about how, based on a life up to this point, the young person is getting ready to go into adulthood. And that those young adult years can be so very challenging for people. So when a person has been taught to trust himself or herself, what does that look like in the young adult years?
Well, it leads into intimacy, and that's an area that has lots of levels of meaning for people. It's an interesting word, and it goes back to, you know, when the parent is raising the child, and the Bible tells them, Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. Well, those teen years is when a lot of parents think to themselves, what have I done? Where did I miss it? But one of the most wonderful things about that scripture is to realize that it's talking about the training, like we said, parenting the way that God would parent us. In the way he should go has to do with helping that child achieve their potential, not necessarily, and I would say not mostly, complying with a set of rules and strictures, but in looking at their talents, their skill sets, and helping them to develop those. So a child who's had that kind of training, when they hit young adulthood, they're going to start creating new relationships. That's why it's called the level of intimacy. As they affiliate themselves with different groups, they start taking portions of their identity from that group as well. So if you are a band member, you know, oh, well, I'm a band member, and there's a real sense of identity that comes with that common calling or that common interest, or I'm a ball player, you know, or I'm a cheerleader, you know, whatever groups you happen to, I'm a science, you know, I am a typist, you know, whatever your gifts are, that becomes part of how you think of yourself. And that's part of those developing competencies that we talked about. As you get more and more affirmations back that tells you, yes, you are good in this, you fit here, you belong, this is who you are, this is your giftedness.
Well, and before we started this video, you and I were having a conversation about middle age and how that term has changed over the years. And now it's a very broad group of people who consider themselves in middle age, but yet that environment of trust continues to manifest itself if a person has been raised in that environment, or even if they haven't been raised in the environment, then perhaps they will recognize that God wants us to live as though we are trusted by Him. So what does the environment of trust, what is the impact of the environment of trust on the person in the middle age sector?
Well, as you hit that middle ages area, you've created your relationships, you've got your groups, and you start wanting to reproduce yourself in many ways. And that involves establishing families, having children, beginning to raise those children, mentoring other people in your area of expertise. You know, you might call up a friend, hey, you want to come over and learn how to bake cupcakes? If you've developed an area of expertise, whatever your area is, you start wanting to invest yourself in other people. And that's part of creating your kingdom, if you will. It's how you spread yourself and clone yourself. You become part of other people. You become part of history as you invest yourself in other people. And, you know, we like to say, oh, you can look at this child and say, that's just their father made over, you know, and that's gives that father a feeling of great joy. Or when someone looks at my daughter and says, you know what, she's just like you. Oh my goodness, you know, my heart just blooms. And it has to do not only with how proud I am of her, but also of the desire we all have to have some participation in history as it continues to work itself out. And so when you come through an environment of trust, you have a greater ability to do that with greater ease. But I want to take a moment and talk about what if you don't come from trust? Can you get over into trust? Obviously, coming from an environment of trust has a lot of benefits. It has a lot of joys. And if you want to have a life of joy, how do you get there? And so I want to just stop and say, you know, whenever in the earlier parts of the teaching, we talked about coming from God and being like God, being made in His image, and knowing that God created us and loved us so much that He wanted to redeem us. So, so we get to, once we've reached the age of accountability, the age where we're able to make cognitive decisions. We've got data, we've got information that's come in, we're interacting with other people, we're deciding who we are and who we're going to be. We have the ability and the option to choose to change to a life based in trust. And we can only do that because of some of the things that have already been talked about, that we know that Jesus is historically a true and accurate figure who had some very straightforward and beautiful things to say about who He was and why He came to earth. And that love that He manifested for us, we can look at that, we can learn from it, and we can change to people of trust, even if we started in distrust.
Oh, beautiful, Melanie. I think that is such an important lesson for all of us, because sometimes we lose our way. Sometimes
Yes.
we might trust ourselves, and then something strange happens in life, and we lose that trust. And so what I'm hearing you say is the Bible teaches us that we can learn to trust, and we can learn to treat other people with trust and wisdom because God teaches us the basis of trust. So thanks for that. And by the way, this continues on throughout our life past middle-age years, doesn't it?
Absolutely. One of my favorite verses, Colossians 2:20. I want to read it if I may. Since you died with Christ to the basic principles of this world, why, as though you still belong to it, do you submit to its rules? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These are all destined to perish with use because they are based on human commands and teachings. Such regulations have the appearance of wisdom with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. It goes on in Colossians to say that because we have been buried with Christ, that we arise as new creatures. And that means we get a do-over in a lot of ways.
Oh, yes. Oh, very good. Thank you so much. That's a great lesson. The video before this one discussed a life built on distrust. So if you, the audience, if you've seen this video today, and you might want to go back and watch the other video to determine if you believe you were taught to trust yourself and others or not. And if not, and if you have questions, please send us your questions, and we will direct those to a trainer who can answer those questions for you. And the email that you would send the questions to is nlbiministry@gmail.com. nlbiministry@gmail.com. We thank you very much. Thank you, Melanie, so much for teaching this lesson today.
It's been my great pleasure to be with you.
Very good. I hope that you have enjoyed this lesson today, and we would love to hear from you, any comments or questions, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.